In the quiet town of Harlow, a boy named Craig lives with his father, who's been trapped in a deep sadness ever since Craig's mother passed away. Every Sunday without fail, they attend church together, and Craig often gets to stand in front of the congregation to read passages from the Bible. During one of these weekly services, a reclusive billionaire named Mr. Harrigan notices Craig and later visits him with an unexpected proposal. He'd like to hire Craig to come read books to him, since his eyesight has begun to deteriorate. Craig doesn't quite understand why he was picked instead of other kids in town who are more experienced or better readers, but he's not about to turn down the chance to earn some money for his family. Harrigan lives in a large, somewhat intimidating mansion on the outskirts of town. 3 times a week, Craig walks there to read aloud while sipping tea prepared by the housekeeper Edna. Though many of the books are quite advanced, Craig gradually becomes more comfortable with them and begins to enjoy the intellectual conversations they spark with Harrigan. He also finds himself fascinated by the mansion itself, especially its elegant decor and Harrigan's prized flower collection. However, there's one room he's never allowed to enter, a locked closet, which Harrigan warns is filled with grim secrets. Craig occasionally helps out with small chores around the house, like clearing snow from the porch, but Harrigan insists on reading the newspapers himself. He wants to stay informed about business and financial affairs. The longer Craig spends time with the old man, the more intrigued he becomes about his employer's history. Eventually, curiosity gets the best of him, and Craig looks him up online. He discovers that Harrigan had once been a fierce and feared businessman, infamous for his cutthroat strategies and corporate takeovers. Unsurprisingly, his reputation left him with few friends. He never married, never had children, and is estranged from the few relatives he does have, making his current life a very lonely one. Craig, who still carries guilt over his mother's death, finds himself relating to Harrigan more than he probably should. As their bond grows, Harrigan begins sending Craig cards on special occasions: Valentine's Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and his birthday, each one including a lottery ticket. But Craig never wins. Years pass. By the time Craig reaches his teenage years, he's still keeping up his visits to Harrigan's home 3 times a week, only ever missing one day due to a bout of the flu. Even then, he felt bad about it, suspecting that reading together is one of the few things Harrigan genuinely looks forward to. When Craig becomes old enough for high school, he must start commuting by bus to the nearest city, since Harlow doesn't have one. The transition is jarring. Suddenly he's surrounded by a completely different world, one full of social hierarchies, cliques, and nearly everyone glued to their smartphones, while he doesn't even own one. Despite the culture shock, Craig manages to make a few friends, but nothing prepares him for his encounter with Kenny, an aggressive bully who corners him on the first day, demanding that Craig polish his shoes in the restroom, claiming it's a freshman's duty. Craig refuses. When the confrontation escalates, a teacher named Miss Hart intervenes, but Craig chooses not to report what really happened, brushing it off instead. Unfortunately, Kenny doesn't see this as a gesture of peace. As soon as the teacher leaves, he makes it clear that Craig hasn't seen the last of him. After school, Craig decides not to tell his father about the run-in with the bully. Instead, he simply asks if he can get a phone, but his request is turned down. A few days later, during one of his visits to Mr. Harrigan's home, Craig brings up the subject of bullies, hoping to get some wisdom without being too obvious. Harrigan admits he had his share of people trying to push him around in the business world, and says he always dealt with them firmly without hesitation. Months pass, and when Christmas rolls around, Craig receives 2 surprises. His dad finally gives in and gets him a phone, and one of Harrigan's usual holiday lottery tickets actually wins, netting Craig a $3,000 prize. The first thing Craig does with his new phone is call Harrigan to thank him. Harrigan tells him it's a small gesture he offers to people he considers true friends. With a phone of his own, Craig suddenly finds it easier to connect with the more popular kids at school. He even catches the attention of a girl he likes. But even with a growing social life, he never stops visiting Harrigan's house. One day, Harrigan asks him directly why he keeps coming back when he clearly doesn't need to anymore. Craig replies honestly he's not doing it out of duty. He genuinely enjoys the time they spend together. The answer brings tears to Harrigan's eyes. Later, Craig convinces his dad to let him use part of the lottery winnings to buy a smartphone for Harrigan. At first, the old man refuses. He's worried he might become addicted, which is the same reason he doesn't keep a television or a radio in the house. But Craig shows him how the phone can give him real-time access to the news and stock market updates, and Harrigan changes his mind. From then on, Craig starts each visit by teaching Harrigan something new about the phone before they get to their reading. He sets up a voicemail message, adds contacts, and even helps Harrigan pick out a nickname: Pirate King, a reference to how the press used to refer to him in his corporate days. Craig also adds Harrigan's favorite song as his ringtone. Soon, Harrigan becomes obsessed with the device. There are moments when he gets so caught up scrolling that he tunes out the reading, but Craig always manages to bring him back. Craig starts getting concerned when he notices Harrigan now needs an oxygen tank to sleep. Curious, he asks why the old man never moved to a bigger city where he could get better medical care. Harrigan explains that he chose Harlow for its simplicity, a place where no one bothers him or asks anything of him. Craig shares his own dream to move to the city and become a screenwriter. Harrigan isn't thrilled by the idea. He warns Craig that the industry is full of people looking to tear others down and urges him to strike quickly and without regret if he ever runs into enemies. Craig is moved by how Harrigan still speaks with such strength, even in his declining health. But Craig also notices something that saddens him deeply: a drawer filled with unused lottery tickets. It becomes clear Harrigan didn't have many people to send them to, which only adds to the loneliness he tried to hide. Not long after, Craig stops by the mansion while Edna is off for the day. When Harrigan doesn't answer the door, Craig lets himself in. What he finds is heartbreaking. Harrigan has died, still sitting in his chair, his phone clutched in one hand. What hits Craig hardest is when he checks the phone and realizes Harrigan had been about to call him. Fighting back tears, Craig dials his father and asks him to come. He then takes a moment to honor Harrigan with one of his favorite quotes from literature. The ambulance and police arrive, and eventually Craig heads home, only to realize he accidentally brought Harrigan's phone with him, along with one last connection to someone he loved dearly. That night, Craig sends a message to Harrigan's phone saying he'll always treasure the afternoons they shared. At the funeral, the turnout is small. Craig stands up and reads a Bible passage, then gently places Harrigan's phone into the suit he's wearing in the casket. Harrigan is buried close to Craig's mother's grave, a place his father visits regularly, though Craig has only been once, finding it too painful to fully accept her loss. After the service, a man overseeing Harrigan's estate hands Craig an envelope. Inside is a letter from Harrigan himself, detailing what he left Craig in his will. Although he wasn't supportive of Craig's dream of becoming a writer, he still wanted to help, leaving him $800,000 in a trust fund to pay for college and any future studies. But what shakes Craig most is the final line of the letter, a postscript that says Harrigan will miss their afternoons too. The exact same words Craig had texted him after his passing. Craig tells himself it's probably just a coincidence. Still, he can't stop thinking about it. One stormy night, unable to sleep, Craig calls Harrigan's voicemail. He thanks him again for the generous gift, but admits that if it meant having his friend back, he'd give it all up in a heartbeat, because what he really misses is him. The next morning, Craig wakes up to something deeply unsettling, a bizarre text message from Harrigan's number. It's just a random string of letters, but the fact that it came from a dead man's phone sends chills down his spine. Panicked, Craig runs to his father, fearing the worst, that Harrigan might have somehow been buried alive, but his dad reassures him that's impossible. The hospital conducted a full autopsy before releasing the body, and there's no way Harrigan could still be alive. He suggests it's probably a cruel prank, maybe someone spoofed the phone number. Still, the explanation doesn't sit right with Craig. He visits the cemetery and, just to be sure, calls Harrigan's number again. What he hears next leaves him frozen. Harrigan's ringtone echoes faintly from underground. Later, Craig visits Harrigan's house and has tea with Edna. She shares that Harrigan left her and the gardener a small inheritance. She remembers him as a good man, but not someone you wanted to cross. When Craig asks for specifics, she only hints that a former gardener once stole from Harrigan and came to regret it. Edna lets Craig take something to remember Harrigan by, and he chooses one of his favorite flowers. Not long after, the house is put up for sale, though Edna stays on for a while to care for it. Feeling steadier, Craig returns to school and starts enjoying his classes again, especially with the support of Miss Hart, a kind and attentive teacher. The school bully, Kenny, has stopped bothering him, and eventually gets expelled for selling marijuana. Though Craig wasn't the one who reported him, Kenny assumes he did. Craig's life starts to brighten. He even gets to attend the winter dance with his crush, until Kenny shows up at school afterward and beats him up, threatening to kill him if he tells anyone. Miss Hart finds Craig soon after and suspects Kenny, but Craig keeps quiet, not wanting any more trouble. At home, Craig stays silent, prompting his father to suggest he open up rather than bottle things up. Taking the advice to heart, Craig calls Harrigan's voicemail and confides his fears. The next morning, the town is shaken. Kenny has been found dead. Craig is consumed with guilt, especially after seeing Kenny's grieving family. Even bullies, he realizes, are loved by someone. Distracted all day, he confides in Miss Hart, who reassures him not to blame himself. They talk briefly about ghosts, and Miss Hart admits she avoids the supernatural. Her grandmother warned her not all spirits are kind. Later, Craig visits the old neighborhood of Harrigan's ex-gardener. A local tells him the man took his own life in his truck after losing his job, unable to find new work. Curious, Craig checks the truck and finds a lottery ticket, like the ones Harrigan used to hand out. He also notices unfinished graffiti on the garage, clearly an insult to Harrigan. That night, Craig calls Harrigan's number again and asks for a sign if he had anything to do with Kenny's death. Moments after he hangs up, his phone rings. It's Harrigan's number, and another jumbled message appears. Still rattled the next day, Craig confesses everything to a local priest. Like Craig's dad, the priest thinks it's a prank, someone spoofing the number. He tries to ease Craig's guilt by explaining that Kenny had been drinking and died after slipping while sneaking out, a tragic accident. But he doesn't know that Kenny's mouth was full of shoe polish. The priest also suggests Craig reflect on his unhealthy connection to the phone. Taking the advice seriously, Craig upgrades to a newer model. The store clerk mentions that corrupted messages are sometimes caused by what's called a ghost in the machine. After the switch, Craig tries calling Harrigan again, but this time the call doesn't go through. He figures it's over. When he gets home, he tosses the old phone, but quickly changes his mind, retrieves it, and stores it in a memory box with other keepsakes, hidden in his closet. Time passes. Craig graduates high school and is accepted to a university in Boston. On the day he leaves, he imagines his mom standing beside his dad, waving goodbye. College life is a fresh start. Craig thrives in his classes and enjoys the new environment. But peace doesn't last. One night, his father calls with terrible news. Miss Hart has died in a car crash, hit by a drunk driver named Dean. Heartbroken, Craig returns home for the funeral and watches Dean's trial closely. Despite multiple DUI arrests and having no license, Dean avoids jail again by agreeing to rehab. Furious, Craig rushes to his childhood room to find the old phone. While digging through his closet, he finds a flower crown his mother once made for him. It brings no comfort. In a blind moment of rage, he calls Harrigan's number and leaves a message, asking for Dean's death. Later, calmer, guilt gnaws at him. He keeps checking online, hoping Dean is still alive, but a few days later, Dean's death is in the news. The cause is still being investigated. To learn the truth, Craig drives to the rehab center and poses as a journalist. A nurse tells him Dean was found in the shower, with half a bar of soap in his throat, and traces of shampoo in his system, suggesting he swallowed it to help the soap go down. The chilling part, the soap brand was the same one Miss Hart used, and Dean's suicide note quoted lyrics from Harrigan's favorite song. Craig breaks down in his car, overwhelmed by the weight of what's happened, convinced he's now responsible for a second death. Back home, he receives another strange message from Harrigan. He recalls the locked closet he once opened, which held only relics of Harrigan's childhood, mostly memories of his own mother. It hits him. Harrigan may have been just as lonely, and their connection was rooted in shared grief. Craig visits Harrigan's grave, one last time. Maybe, he wonders, these messages are Harrigan's way of telling him to let go. Tearfully, he thanks Harrigan, and quietly apologizes to his mom. Overcome with emotion, Craig runs to the quarry, contemplating ending it all. But in a moment of clarity, he takes the old phone and hurls it into the river. As it disappears into the water, Craig feels the bond between him and Harrigan finally break, and peace at last. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more haunting tales like this one. Thanks for watching.